Thank you, Doug. This was a great film. Really also nicely edited. I enjoyed it. I have one question. Was it healthy to sit in front of the machine? Was it real lead like that was liquefied, and were the fumes a problem?
Check, check, check. It's switched on. Can you hear me?
Wait a minute. Check.
There we go. It's a great question about if it's healthy or not. That's a really good question. Yes, it was real lead. So the type metal was lead, tin, and antimony in kind of a mixture. Yeah, you shouldn't breathe the fumes. I mean, as it says in the film, like it was a I guess you probably don't know what OSHA means, like, a government organization to make things safe. It wasn't safe. But it wasn't also as dangerous as it seems or as it sounds. Like I don't think that there are any like proven cases of connections of like lead poisoning or something with handling of the machine. So I think it seems more dangerous than it was. But I do remember I like the line like the machine doesn't suffer fools, right? Like you can hurt yourself real bad on a Linotype if you want to. But if you know what you're doing, you'll be okay.
Any plans on making these available for different audiences, and in what order? For example, like I'm obviously interested to show this to my students somehow,
Right.
sooner
Right.
than later. But yeah, anything would be good.
Yeah, so just to be clear, actually, so it's interestingly, the film's been out for 10 years, actually. So it's not a new film. It's a new audience, and I appreciate the ATypI wanting to do it, and that's kind of, we connected with my talk. But yeah, it is available, linotypefilm.com. You can get it digitally. You can also have your library get a specific license for your students. So yeah, you can talk to the librarians. And yeah, anyone can buy it or rent it. I don't know how, it's on Amazon and a few other things, but I don't know how that exactly works here in Australia. But yeah, linotypefilm.com, you can get it, and it works anywhere. Oh. Thank you, everyone, for watching it, by the way. Like, I really appreciate it. Like, you didn't have to stay. You could have gone and eaten dinner, so thank you.
Thanks for coming. I can't believe this is your first ATypI.
It is my first ATypI.
I just want to say, watching it again in Australia, I'm struck by how many wonderful accents there are in this movie.
Yeah, there was actually an Australian that was there as well. I don't remember exactly his story now, but yeah, he was there at Linotype University. He had the Cambridge University sweater on, though, or jumper or whatever. So, other questions? Don't be shy. Come on.
Okay, so this isn't so much a question as it is a theory. You asked earlier
Yes.
about the G's not having the line in them.
Yes.
And I'm curious if the answer to this mystery is it's the very beginning of the Australian language, how we drop the G off everything. So it becomes going, being, doing. There's
Yeah.
no G on the end. Maybe this is how it started. It just
Ooh.
slowly
I
disappeared
like-
piece by piece.
We need a linguist in
Yeah.
here. I like that theory, actually.
Just a
That's
theory.
great.
Do you have a linotype machine?
No, thankfully. I did at one point own a Vandercook that we had in our third bedroom, and we had a party at our house. This was before kids as well. We had a party at our house, and everyone got to print a poster to take home from the party at our house. But no, I don't have a Linotype. I'm not smart enough to own one, and I'm not mechanical enough to do it, and also my wife would not allow it wisely. No. Like, the thing about the Linotype is, as I think it says in the film, like, they are their own worst enemy. They're so, when they are running, they are such amazing mechanical machines. But they were made to run all the time. So even machines that are working ones that are at museums still actually run really sluggishly, because when you turn them off for a week or whatever, they were newspaper machines. They were used 18 hours a day, and then you start setting type for the next edition, right? So these machines are so complicated, and when they were prevalent, there was someone that was an operator of the machine, and then there was a machinist. And the machinist had a totally different skill set, was, at least in the United States, a completely different union as well. So like the machinist literally couldn't touch the keyboard, and the operators couldn't touch anything but the keyboard, right? So they were kind of their own worst enemy in the amount of complexity. I really think of them as like mechanical computers as well. Like I'm not sure where Quinn was with the Chinese typewriter, that same mechanism, oh, there you are, with like, the different barrels, then there's 6 of them and they rotate around. Like that level of craftsmanship, like it's amazing that they ever worked, right? And how my brain works, like I think it's amazing. But no, I do not own a Linotype. The best I can do is I could kind of sit down and like slowly type away. I kind of understand where the keys are and all of that. I can send it to be cast. But if it stops anywhere in that process, I'm lost.
Nice.
Third question at the same table.
I like it. Milan, you're next.
Just a random technical or like mechanical curiosity is, I can imagine if you're typing slowly, it's fine. It casts it when it's ready. But if you're typing really quickly, is it possible to type faster than the machine can kind of receive the matrices and get it ready? And if so, is there kind of like a mechanism that like records what you're typing and then it can catch up? Or
so there's nothing to record. There's no like memory at all. But yes, it is possible. The best Linotype operators were called Swifts, which is the same word that were for hand compositors. And a really good Swift could do what's called hanging a machine, where you're like, because that is what's cool about it. You can be typing the next line as the current line you just sent to be casting is going. So you can keep it going in a very continuous circle. And you could hang the machine where like it's still casting, you've got another line ready to go, and you want to start typing the next line. I mean, that would obviously, though, often happen on just narrow measure of like a 15 pica or 12 pica column. The longer it is, the longer it would take to type. So yes, you could hang the machine, and that was like a big pride if you could actually hang the machine. If you as an operator were so good that you could actually be a little faster than the machine. Yeah.
Hi, in your research specific to Australia for your talk before the film, did you uncover anything, any dates or approximate years in terms of when it sort of wrapped up here commercially? If some context, I did used to work for the newspapers here, and I met imaging people who previously were trained in metal type, and they were definitely not as old as any of these people. So I feel like maybe it trailed on a little bit in our little corner of the world, and I just want to see.
No, that's a really good question. I believe, as much as I know, it was still around the same time as most other places in the world. In the United States, what was interesting about actually the bigger the newspaper, the longer they took replacing the Linotype, because they had so much invested in their process, and they're a daily newspaper, so they can't like easily change it. So it was still mainly the 60s and 70s. Small shops would have started changing, probably mid 60s or so, and then newspapers by 1975. I don't know exactly, but I would definitely wager that it was 1975 when this mostly went out in the newspapers. The latest major newspaper I know of was 1982, the Chicago Times, or Chicago Sun, one of those. So yeah, it was still the 70s. But also remember, the film's 10 years old. I mean, here comes Doug with the sad part. I think 8 or 9 of these people that we've interviewed have passed away since, which I feel genuinely thankful that I just was able to make the film at the right time, because a lot of them still had their acuity with them. A lot of them still had these stories. They were really flabbergasted by this 30-year-old kid who wanted to know more about the Linotype because they hadn't talked about it in 30 or 40 years. That's the thing, right? They had so quickly had to just adjust to new technology. They never got to think like, oh, I really miss the old way that we did things. And hopefully in the film, we tried to balance that, not just nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. But yeah, I believe probably, I would assume around the same time here in Australia.
Could I add something that might help with your OSHA question, the health and safety? So my uncle was trained in hot metal, but also the imaging, and he was like sort of fixing up photography and color correcting and stuff.
Yeah.
I'd sit with him to edit through photos and stuff, and I remember him telling me that they used to provide milk free of charge as part of the job when they were working with the lead, because apparently that would help with the absorption of the lead. The milk would somehow help them not absorb as much lead.
That is both fascinating and terrifying.
And I don't know how true it is, but I thought I'd just mention that because I believed
I'm gonna do some research on that. I've never heard that, but that might be true. I mean, not that it didn't happen, but like the absorption and stuff. I have no idea. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I've heard the story about milk as well.
Okay, maybe it's a thing. See, this is the rabbit hole. I'm just like, cool, I'm gonna go read a paper about milk absorption of lead now, because I don't know why. Other questions? Yeah, Susan.
Just thank you so much. It's so interesting. I think I cried multiple times the first time I saw the film because it's, just so devastating. I was just wondering if you could talk a bit about the book project and your plans and like the continuation of the story. And how much of that's fleshed out.
Here's the whole thing. Again, I found this interesting story. I thought it should be told. Ended up, I had to be the one to make it. And then I was just going to be done, right? And so film came out in 2012, toured and screened it many places. By 2014, I was kind of finished. I thought I would be done. Now I know myself better. And like, there's just more stories that still need to be told that I couldn't fit in 76 minutes of the film. There's this whole story, especially in the United States, of the unions and the labor unions, because there was a huge, like, when the Linotype came in and then eventually when it went out, there's this huge story, and it's all about capitalism, of course, because everything is, but like, and I just couldn't get into that story in the film. I've just found so many more archives and beautiful images and material. So about a year ago, I announced, both naively and with very clear eyes, that I'm going to write a book about it, because there is a book that came out after my film, which would have been really helpful if it had come out before my film, but it didn't, that Frank Romano, one of the main people there, wrote. But now that's been 10 years. It's 10 years old, and I love Frank's book, but it's a lot of facts. And to me, something that we really tried, and I think we got the balance right, was not just sharing facts, but also sharing stories and connecting with the people, right? And so that's what I'm trying to do. And like I was saying, underrepresented groups, the African American press, I would really like to tell more about that story. My research here about, like, I'm wanting to understand more how the machine went around the world, how it was. Just today I was talking with Willie and saw a document, like an official document that Linotype produced about trying to adapt Linotype to the Chinese language, which I don't even understand how that works. But like, I just found out about this today, April whatever, 2024. So like, I just can't shut up about it. I think it's interesting. And I have found that other people have found it interesting as well, which I really appreciate. So yeah, linotypebook.com for that if you want more. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. I first saw a Linotype machine when I was about 8 in
Love it.
In the early 60s, when my mum was a journalist and a reporter
that's the best.
For a local newspaper. So this is regional Melbourne.
Yeah.
And so a weekly local newspaper.
Yep.
So you were saying that these things had to go all day. But
right.
They also did other publications. So they
of
were
course,
working
right.
full bore all week to meet those commitments. But so that was 60 years ago.
Love it. I love it.
The fascination of that time then when I was about 8 has culminated in today being me being here. But
I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for coming.
That was a bit of a journey in between. However, they also were pairing that with one of the first 4-colour web printing machines.
Okay.
As well. So I know that they had that Linotype machine still going in the mid-70s.
Okay.
When I was at art school.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, you could still. So the thing is, you could still do offset printing with the Linotype in the sense of you would set it, you would print it, and you would print it on like the smoothest paper possible, because then you would photograph the art. The text, and then you would then make a negative of it for offset. So you could still use it. It was just really slow compared to other photo technologies that would have been out at that time.
Yeah. And one other thing I noticed, they had the smelter detached from the machine, and they had that out the back door. And it was constantly going all day, and they were coming out with a bucket and taking it.
Yeah.
Yes. So as a little kid, I wasn't allowed to go into the room.
Yeah.
I could watch it, and I wasn't allowed to go out the back door because that's where the smelter was.
Yeah. Right, because you can melt down all of that metal and reuse it.
Yes.
And I don't know if you know the term for young kids in print shops were called printers' devils, which I've always thought was a pretty great name. Any other questions? Oh, John, I'm right here. Thank you for your continued interest. You go.
For your future book, are you aware that there were a number of science fiction short stories written in the 30s and 40s about Linotype machines?
Yes, and I have 3 or 4 now that I've collected. There was also a Twilight Zone episode, which is a television series in the United States. You can find at least part of it on YouTube. A Twilight Zone episode called The Printer's Devil, that was the title of it. And it's centered about this Linotype that predicts the future news. And tragedies happen, and it's pretty great.
I think that's from one of the stories too. It was adapted from one of the stories.
Yeah.
Also, I've written a couple.
Yes, yeah. So, that's another thing. So I'm not a science fiction fan, but I have collected these great science fiction stories, short stories, and I think that speaks to how ubiquitous the machine was. The Linotype's a funny machine because, what you consumed wasn't the machine or even what the machine made. You consumed the newspaper, right? So unlike Henry Ford, who we know about the car, or Thomas Edison and the light bulb, we didn't know about Ottmar Mergenthaler and the inventor. And I think that was part of what I wanted to do with the story was wait, this thing impacted the world, but people don't know about it because they didn't consume, they didn't care. They just wanted their newspaper on their front porch in the morning, like they said in the film, right? That's all they cared about. And so I think that's maybe, I don't know, some weird mission of hey, people should know about this more. But yeah, it was ubiquitous enough to be in these science fiction stories and in a Twilight Zone episode and things like that. I think that's really fascinating.
Well, when I first saw this movie about a decade ago, I had grown up reading those stories when I was a kid, when they were still old. I mean, they were 20 or 30 years old when I started reading them.
Right.
And your movie made it clear to me why these old writers, these guys who had made their living as Linotype machine operators, were still fascinated enough by the machines to write these stories about them.
Totally. Another thing that I've been collecting, and I easily have over a dozen already, are poems about the Linotype. And that's how we finished the film, right? Oh, fun fact, that final scene, Carl reading the poem, that was the very first scene we edited, day 1. Brandon edited it that way and was that's our ending. And we kept it the entire way, exactly like that. But so they're writing poems about this machine. I don't, my laptop, I have zero connection to it, right? But these people, that's what's special about this machine. They had a connection that, I don't know, it was really unique, and that's, I was really honored to get to capture that.
Ode to an iPhone. You mentioned the the unions and printers unions, typesetters unions in the United States.
Yes.
When I worked as a phototype setter originally in a shop in Seattle, we wanted to unionize, but the old Linotype Operators Union saw us as the enemy and wouldn't do it. I think one of the other people thought they might get a graphic arts union local in Alaska to take us on. It never happened.
Yeah, I mean, the union story, I promise, though it sounds really boring, is really fascinating and really, really interesting because it's the story of capitalism. It's the story of people with money want to produce a product for less money, and people are caught in the middle. And like so I really hope to be able to tell that story well. Yeah. All right, last couple questions. Jason.
Well, I'm wondering if you know more about the drawings of the letters. I have a few.
Yes.
And I think they're absolutely fascinating, but the things that they went through to make them work within the same height,
yes,
I think was really fascinating. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that style of drawing the letters that was so specific to those machines.
Yeah, so the thing, do you mean the duplex where it's like bold and Roman or italic and whatever?
No, the original drawings.
Or the big 12-inch drawings.
Yeah.
So there's this really, so to get the final engraving on one of these matrices, and what is this? I can't tell. It's a FL ligature. So this tiny, what is this, 8-point, I think? Doesn't matter, why am I wasting my time? 10-point letter here would have started out as a 12-inch drawing. So Linotype in America, at least, the UK's were, I think, like 10-inch drawings, would draw that FL ligature, and there would be multiple versions of it, and then I won't bore you with the steps that it goes through, but yeah, it would go from these 12-inch pencil drawings down to all these different sizes, and then be engraved into a punch, and these hardened punches would literally punch, that's why it's called, into these brass, and they use brass because it's a softer metal, and these hardened steel punches would punch in the letter, or the figure or whatever, into it. And so, yeah, so that's what all those black boxes that Frank Romano was going through, they actually had to get rid of the black boxes because they were like filled with mold and they were starting to ruin the drawings. But the beauty is they still have all of the drawings that were inside, and now they're really quite organized, and they're at the Museum of Printing outside of Boston. So you can still go see these original drawings of all of these different typefaces. And I think that's really neat to see that, and some of them have been digitized, and it's a fascinating relic of this insane mechanical process just to make a font.
I think one of the things that really fascinated me about it was the way they would have to fit everything in the same height. So they would, all the diacritics and everything would be there in that same drawing, and like a capital H would have like one side lower so they could fit the diacritics over the lower piece, I mean, it was really kind of
that's the
fascinating
thing.
Puzzle they would.
I mean, like, I'm not a type designer now, and it still sounds terrible to do what Troy and Jordan do, but like, imagine having to design to like physical constraints, right? The width of this character, that I won't go into duplexing, but like the width is fixed and you can't change it, and so you want to make it a little, like you can't kern with these. Like you can't get an italic F to go over. That's why there's always the button hook F. Any of the original Linotype metal faces had this little F where the top just went like this because it couldn't go over to the next letter because it's a physical piece of metal that had to go up and it couldn't bridge that gap over. Of course, that changed later with photo and digital, but yeah. So, all right, last question.
I think the fascination that a lot of people have for this machine, that's what I like to have in the film. I wonder if you can think of any other device or machine that we have in the past or for current that is worth doing a movie in the future.
I mean, I'm not going to make another movie. I'll tell you that. Everyone keeps asking me if I'm going to make the Monotype movie, and I work for Monotype now, and I'm definitely not making the Monotype movie. You can. I'll give you so many tips to make a movie if you want. I think what's funny about this film is it's about a machine but it's not about the machine. It's like centered around the machine, right? And I think that is, and I give that credit to one of the guys who made the film with me, Brandon, who edited it. Machines can be fascinating, but like, hey, look at this cool machine isn't a very interesting movie. Like, I think talking about the people that connected to this machine and these feelings they have 40 years later, that's what I think was compelling. Some of my favorite compliments were people that would come to the screening of the films and they were like, oh, I didn't know what this machine was, or I didn't care, or oh, they just drugged me to it. You know, my partner is a printer and whatever. I don't care, and I love the film. That's when I knew that we had done, if I can say, a good job, because it connected, people connect to people, right? And like, machines are fascinating, but if there's not a human component, it's only so interesting. So I don't know if I really answered your question.
Yeah. I think it might be even that the fact that they spend their whole lives in that, like a working 35 years.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, these machines, we just don't have that affinity for digital products. Like, I get a new phone every 2 years, I get a new laptop every 3 years, but like, some of these people had Linotypes in their basement to like earn extra money to put themselves or their kids through college. And like, and when you work with a machine, like, I also heard like people that ran the machines, they only worked at one machine and they would work on the same machine and they couldn't get the other machine to run. Like, you kind of got to know, it's like a manual car, right? If you drive a manual transmission car, you are invariably paying attention and you're working with the engine and you can feel the revs and you know, and when you drive an electric car, you just, right? And it doesn't even like coast anymore. And it's fun and you can go really fast, but like, it's not the same. You don't connect with a Tesla the way that you connect with an old Porsche, right? You just don't. Like, neither one is better or worse, but you just don't connect with it that way, so.
It's a different experience.
It's a different experience, exactly.
Thank you so much, Doug.
Thank you so much.
Give a round.
Thank you so much.
We do have some snacks outside that you can gather on your way out, forage, and we will be back in the morning at 9:30 talk, 9:15 opening remarks. So we'll see you again. Thank you so much.